for our third stakeholder comment panel. My apologies to folks who were trying to estimate how long this would take. I know the panels took longer than I thought, but they've all been really, really very good. So hopefully you found it all as useful as we have. And with that, I want to turn to the agriculture titled panel. And I know Steve's not here, so the others of you. Gosselin got put in. He's a utility fielder, man. He's from one of those counties we always use an example of a county doing a really, really good job. I know, and you are a farmer.
Yeah, he's not.
Go Sox.
Right.
Yeah. Someone just actually gave me the 100-year hat. Do you have one of those? I might have to. Thank you. Panel, I will let you. How are you organized yourselves, and how do you want to introduce you? Tim, you're first. Do you want to introduce your whole panel, or do you want the panel to introduce themselves, or? All right.
Oh, turn on your, don't forget that button.
Turn on the green light and get closer to it than you want
Okay.
to. See, it's really.
Is that coming through now? Okay.
Can you guys hear in the back? Okay.
Okay, and how does the PowerPoint get going? Okay. So, thank you, State Board, for the opportunity to present today. My name is Tim O'Halloran. I'm the General Manager of Yolo County Flood Control and Water Conservation District. And I'm going to be talking about the work that we've done in terms of our region in Yolo County in terms of groundwater measurement, monitoring, and management. But I'd also like to preface it by saying that we're part of a bigger region, the Sacramento Valley. And of course, you've heard David Guy present many times, and also the paper that they've submitted, the comments on the groundwater concept paper have been, I'll hit a couple points on there, but I encourage the staff and the board to look at those comments carefully. They're well thoughtful. They're very thoughtful, and they were put together by a collective of managers in the Sacramento Valley. So, okay, first to give a little context to my experience as a district manager, we manage the Clear Lake and Cache Creek watershed. You can see on the screen in front of you the two reservoirs that exist in Lake County, Clear Lake, a natural body of water, and Indian Valley Reservoir, and they come down 60 miles to the green area, which is western Yolo County, which is actually, it's hard to represent on here, but it's our biggest storage reservoir. It's the groundwater basin below the green there, and we're a natural conjunctive use area. We've been doing it for many years, and we've had a monitoring program for 60 years that we've made a little more robust in the previous 10 years. If you notice, the service area includes the cities of Woodland, Davis, and Winters, 3 of the 4 Yolo County cities, and we've got a great relationship and great partnership through an organization called the Water Resources Association of Yolo County. We work closely with the urban sector, and it's part of our management strategy. At least for another couple of years, they're on groundwater, so what we do in terms of water surface supply and usage affects them. So we've got a great partnership with the urban area in our field. And of course, one of the themes in the paper and of the day today, the many presentations today talk about local management and all that in individual districts' circumstances. And I started my career down in the Imperial Valley lining ditches with concrete. And up in Yolo, we by district policy, we don't line the ditches where we recharge or percolate 25% of every 100 acre feet that we release from the reservoirs. 25 acre feet of those go into recharge, and that's a deliberate strategy to not only recharge, keep that green area that I showed you on the previous slide full of healthy and a full aquifer, but also it allows us to do things such as habitat management, riparian habitat along the side that provides environmental and water quality benefits as well. So the point there is every area is unique, every solution is unique. Change happens. I know a couple of you have seen this slide before on other panels that we've been on together, but especially in this day today, where the focus is on groundwater and groundwater management and how can we improve our our management policies and regulations. But the reality is that any water manager, any business manager will tell you that you got to be prepared for any change that it happens, whether it's economic, regulatory, technical, land use, or climate. This slide, I first started using this slide when I was giving a presentation on climate change. And right today, my focus is on drought management, part of climate anyway, but that kind of overwhelms us. So all of a sudden, when 80% of the revenue, district revenue, is taking a hit this year from zero supply circumstances, which, by the way, the Clear Lake and Indian Valley, if we were to start the irrigation season today, we'd have zero releases. So we're preparing ourselves and our farmers for zero supply this year, from zero surface supply. But in order to get ready for change, any sort of change that I mentioned just before, there's through the integrated regional water management planning process that Yolo County completed in 2007 and then expanded to a larger group of 4 counties area, Napa, Solano, and Lake counties, in a recent edition that came out last year. We developed our thinking into what we call foundational actions, and a foundational action is an action that informs other projects or other actions. And it's the base, and I always come back to it because it's the way we fundamentally organize ourselves to be able to react to any change that happens, whether it's a drought, whether it's a regulatory change, whether it's an economic change, a land use shift, or that. And you can see on the list here the type of things that we call foundational actions. Groundwater monitoring, which I'll talk about in more detail, but surface water monitoring. And groundwater and surface water monitoring include both quantity and quality too at the same time. Subsidence monitoring, we've worked with the Department of Water Resources on every 3-year basis so we can measure subsidence, but so on and so forth. Groundwater modeling. These are the foundational tools we have to react to any change, so that we're not always trying to scramble for data and scramble for information at the last moment. But these are what we protect in times of budget crises. We really emphasize that these need to be protected. Speaking specifically about our groundwater monitoring program, the district's been involved in groundwater monitoring for over 60 years. Typical sort of level monitoring, spring and fall, 2 points. But more recently, about 8 years ago, we developed, we turned it over. We started working collaboratively with our partners, the other 11 members of the Water Resources Association in Yolo County, and developed a countywide database for all the entities, not just the district, but the cities have a ton of data. The aggregate companies, the cement companies have, by regulation, have to provide data to it. The USGS, the DWR, they all come. It's our own little CASGEM program, actually. In fact,
right.
it is more robust in many regards than the CASGEM program is, at least right now. And more recently, we started adding quality in data to the database, but we've got a 60-year history, which allows us to then predict how things are going to happen. We've also got more recently real-time data measurements. We're putting 2 transects through the district, east-west, north-south, that allow us to make a grid and an index, if you will, of groundwater quality. It's ironic that in the state, everybody can look at the newspaper and see the reservoir's 30% full or 50% full, but there's no simple index of, and there's reasons why there's no simple index, but we're trying to develop our own local index so that the average person, the lay person, can relate to, are we +1 or -1, to some starting point. So, and the real-time monitoring allows us, rather than spring and fall measurements, to look at things. I just looked at it last night. You can see the pumping, the crops are getting ready to go. We're not delivering any surface water, but the pumps are being turned on. And you can see we're about 3 months ahead of the down curve on it. So it's a real-time early warning system so that we can inform through our AB 3030 plan, or we're obligated to look at percent of levels to 1976 levels. And so we start activating an information campaign. So the point here is, of course, that local districts can be very effective, can be very forthright. We collect this information, we put it in a database that we put on the web, so that it's open, it's transparent, it's organized, so anybody can use it. Anybody that has some self-hate and wants to learn more about groundwater.
You did say, I thought maybe I misheard you, but you did say what I thought you said.
Yeah. No, it's when I talk about real-time groundwater measurement, I see the glazing over. Boy, isn't that exciting looking at groundwater in real time. But
We're going to make it the sexiest issue there is.
yeah. But it's good, and it leads to something that's really important to us, and through the NACWA
I love that picture.
program is an information management discussion with the Sacramento Valley Water Resource Managers have been having for a number of years now, but it hangs on our information management, and your paper, of course, talks about that very much so. But there's some principles that are important to us that guide us, and the one is that we're resource managers. We're not just purveyors of water getting from point A to point B, but what we do impacts the environment and other resources. And then the information management, the transparency, and the organization establishes credibility for us so that we can come and present to the public in a way that if they have a question, we don't say, well, we don't know, or we think, or let me go ask somebody else. But we can say, here it is. You can look for it. If you don't believe us, you can look for it yourself and organize it. But then the key is really, and I think this was echoed by somebody on the previous panel, or this echoes something that was said by somebody on the previous panel, is in a little bit different way, understanding the data. There's a lot of data out there, but you got to read it, you got to think about it, you got to be thoughtful, you got to debate it with other people, and then you have to act on it. And you can only do that if you really truly understand the data versus collecting the data. You know, there's a mania for data collection this day, information. You know, but actually the key to progress is actually digging into it and understanding it. So that's in short how one district, and with unique circumstances, and how replicable it is. Everybody's got their own program, but how we do it in Yolo County. And we'd like to think of ourselves as fairly progressive. I would like to just end on noting something that the Governor Brown said in the State of the Union address both a year ago and this morning. Mm-hmm. He introduced a concept called, it's kind of clunky word, but subsidiarity.
Right.
And it's the idea that a central authority should only perform those tasks which cannot be performed at a more immediate or local level. I invite the state board, the staff, the DWR, the Department of Public Health, anybody that's involved, the public at large, to engage with the local people and use the resources wisely. We're all limited on funds, we're all limited on time, but we're not limited on creativity.
Thank you so much. Thanks for your leadership on all of this, as well as telling us where you got that image so that when we use it, we can do proper
This
stuff.
one?
That image is really great, so I'm going to use that one a lot. Thank you very much.
Thank you
Always.
for the opportunity.
Next, a little bit of change from our original panel, and you'll have to forgive me if I mispronounce. Hakam et al.
It's Hisham et al.
Hisham et al. From Merced Irrigation District, and Herb Smart from the Turlock Irrigation District on behalf of the San Joaquin Trips.
Well, again, my name is Hisham et al. I am the Deputy General Manager for the Merced Irrigation District, and I have been at the district for more than 20 years, so I've had my interaction with the local issues as far as water resources and groundwater, and the local politics too. The presentation was put together by John Swagger, so I'm sitting for him. I'm not as handsome or have a full head, but I'll do my best to cover certain points. Now, there has been a lot of panels that spoke before you, and they covered a lot of points that, for example, the Water Resources panel, we sit on the Groundwater Committee, and we ditto everything they say. So as I go I'm going to try to answer some of the questions that were raised by you and tell you how we look at it from our perspective. The Merced Irrigation District is the black boundary that is shown in the purple area, and it spans 3 basins: the Merced Groundwater Basin in purple and the Chowchilla Basin, a portion of it to have about 10,000 acres, and the Chowchilla Basin, which is in green to the south, and We have another 5,000 acres in the Turlock groundwater basin to the north. As you can see, the district is about 164,000 acres. The area we're showing is more than 600,000 acres. So we could only control about 1/5 of the area. Just to kind of, you could see the San Joaquin River to the west and the Merced River to the north of the purple area. So what are we doing? The Merced, ID, county, and cities have been working together. We have been working under an umbrella called the Merced Area Groundwater Pool Interest since 1998. It's made of all the water purveyors in the area, which is both urban and ag. In addition, we have the East Merced Resources Conservation District and Merced County from an environmental health standpoint. Together, we have been working on monitoring the basin, setting some rules, updating the groundwater management plan. We put some rules in the groundwater management plan that we thought they were innovative, but that's something that the state board and others need to kind of look at. For example, do not pump recycled water upstream into the basin so you don't introduce new constituents that have never been there before, and keep the wastewater moving downstream, so you don't, such as pharmaceuticals and such. And in these meetings, basically, all the agencies bring their groundwater levels and groundwater quantity that they have used over a month or 2 months, depending on when the meeting takes place, and we would have a discussion about what's happening in the basin and so on. Again, most of these areas are unfortunately also within the Merced boundary. There are a few areas outside the Merced irrigation district boundary, and there are rural areas. So what have we been doing? You could see that we are working now on a water balance. There have been all kinds of water balances that were done in the past. We're not the only district that have done that. But what we're doing here is we're expanding it to the entire groundwater basin. Another thing that I could say, being an engineer also, is I don't trust water balances, especially ones that are made based on assumptions, be it the evapotranspiration and such, in areas that have large agricultural areas. Deciding how you are going to look at evapotranspiration will determine how your water balance is going to look like. There was a discussion about the GRACE and satellite, how we have an equation, and you look at the water coming in versus water coming out, and there's basically what we call a closure number, which in this case happened to be groundwater, and in our case will be groundwater, except we use evapotranspiration as one of the means leaving the basin. So we are applying new methods, satellite methods, something called metric. We're looking backward, looking at what we've done in our water balances, and based on that, we're hoping that we could calibrate our water balance in the future. I think there will be a big difference. I'm looking forward to that. I mean, there's nothing wrong with going back and say our water balance was not accurate. So maybe that would help answer one of the questions about where's this information coming from. It's basically looking at every green thing that is in the basin, be it urban or ag, and how much water is it using versus the other information that we know. So I covered both groundwater model, surface water model. Then we go to the governance. We have an integrated regional water management plan that has been approved. Interestingly, was also approved by UC Merced. I thought they would never approve it, but they approved it, being how skeptical UCs are. So we thought we have a robust integrated regional water management plan, and MACPI, that is working on the water balance and the model, will be folded as a technical committee under the integrated regional water management plan. There hopefully will be the politicians walking into these plans and starting to make some decisions. So hopefully, one of the questions you asked, what could be done to govern groundwater, maybe in Merced, the AirWIMP would be the way to go.
That sounds
And we have met with staff, state water staff, and we talked about some of the issues that we face, and one of the challenges that the state board is looking at resolving. And one of the things that we discussed is that the state board only has so many knobs that they could work with, and they cannot. They could only work within their means. And when we go to the groundwater, the issue of land management is always big.
big one.
And it could be beyond the state board's realm, but unless if we have some handle on how we engage and the integrated regional water management plan or the governance board with land management, I think we will always have an issue. So maybe it's above all of us pay level at this stage, but that's, to me, that's going to be the biggest change on how we look at groundwater.
It is all connected. I mean, across disciplines, et cetera. We opened the door for that conversation in the administration's draft water action plan, just to note that that is in a couple of places. Local land use planning obviously plays a role. The state role ends up being one of guidelines for what ought to be in local plans and that kind of thing. So there's a discussion that will be happening on that. You're right. It's outside the knobs that the state board has, but it's on deck.
And we have done everything we can to bring the planners from the county and the cities to sit and talk. And planners, my experience with planners, they like to say, their answer is, why don't you just regulate groundwater and we'll use the numbers and we'll go from there. And this whole issue about adaptive and looking to the long range and so on is not something they're used to. So there's going to be a lot of education, and somebody has to bring all the parties to the table at some point. And I'm not saying that the city as in governance, as a government or the county are not interested. It's just those departments in operation, unless if we educate them, they're not going to be able to function. They're going to have an issue with that.
Yeah, and the challenge also, I mean, I started out as a land use lawyer. It's a very different language. So there's even a translation issue, maybe talking about the exact same thing and using different words.
Yeah, we had a meeting not too long ago, and we were shocked with some of how simplified things are from their perspective.
I think someday I'm just going to be a translator of English to English. I think that's my retirement plan.
So, so basically, the other thing that we have is understanding the groundwater basin interactions. How does the water supply help a basin and so on? There has been a lot of discussion about that, and everything is connected to the surface water, to groundwater, to land management, to demand, to growth, and so on. Also, the understanding the natural, direct, and in-lieu recharge. And when I'm going to maybe stop a little bit on the in-lieu recharge. Talking to state board staff, it's one of these items that is difficult to understand, because taking water, for example, outside a place of use is a no-no, and if you go and paint it as in-lieu recharge, as if we're getting a license to take water outside a certain place of use. But so that's probably one of the questions that need to be vetted out, is that when is it in-lieu recharge, and when does the state want to see that happen to help the groundwater situation and the water balance all.
Right.
So and to address, and all of these basically address sustainability. Again, on the groundwater model, it has a water quality model, and the Merced County Environmental Health, basically they will be managing that. The nice thing about this model, we have been working on it since 2006 to get the idea put together and bring all the parties. A lot of skeptics. What is idea up to? What are we trying to do? People, I mean, not only the state board has that concern. We face the same thing. But we insisted on having a stakeholder process, open process, because we don't want to. MID could have its own model, the city could have its own model, the county could have its own model, and special interests could have their own models, and we could go to court together. But the idea is that we have one model that we all agree on and agree on the assumptions and live with it. So we would like to have the fight before the model is done rather than after the model is done. So on what would be helpful, as I think this has been mentioned a number of times, voluntary reports on current local efforts, progress, expected sustainable management. The only reason we have the word voluntary is because, again, to the one size shoe doesn't necessarily fit all. The groundwater is a very, because it's related to the aquifer, somebody could give you information that doesn't make, we could get away with all kinds of things. And trust me, I know how to look at the numbers and how to give you information that would satisfy supposedly a broad brush rule, but when actually it's not. you could have a well that is connected to many aquifers, and you wouldn't know what's happening with the upper aquifer versus lower aquifer. There's a lot of things that get into the interaction of water with soil, and also and how the movement of water is happening. So I think the locals have to be put to the test. The locals have to be put to the test, where we have to figure out what are we trying to accomplish and how are we going to survive. Interestingly, because of 2012 and 13, people that never came to the table with us, they have come, and actually people offered, do you want to measure my well? It's like, man, I've never thought this would ever happen before. But there are some people outside the district very concerned about what's happening, and they want to know what type of solutions are out there. So this is an opportunity.
I saw in a lot of the comments, and I haven't read every single one, but I read a lot of them. There were a lot of interesting comments about us not rushing to say, this is the information you need to submit to us. Either saying, we're already submitting useful information to other agencies, just use that. Or at this phase, let us get the information that's suitable for our particular circumstances, and then you can just take that in, as opposed to making us put it in one format or answer a question that might not be apt, and see where you go. See if we're doing an okay job. Maybe ask us questions, and then focus on the places that aren't collecting any information, as opposed to trying to fit everybody into one of our traditional models. That was an interesting way to start.
Absolutely. I was gonna say that, so I don't have to say it. But we don't have a problem being put to the test. I mean, we're not trying to. Once we have to fill a template or something, we're gonna fill the template. Mm-hmm. I don't know what that would do, but look at the information that we would have otherwise given you voluntarily, and how we test ourselves. I mean, there's the performance measures that we'll be establishing, and so on in the process. So basically, the one thing that has been brought up, and basically I'm reiterating what I've heard from growers and some and other folks being cities and communities in our area, basically allow locals to complete the process. We started the model, we have an air WIMP, we're trying to put a governance board, and everybody is like looking at each other and said, well, are we wasting our time? Should we wait what the state should do? I would like to say, no, let's keep going. And finance and financial technical assistance, obviously, everybody is going to bring that up. And the point that we're made as far as giving guidance into helping people work together by the state goes a long way. And we have been very fortunate. Actually, this water resources model that I'm talking about is 50% funded by the DWR, and we have been working with them hand in hand. So, help locals improve infrastructure to take advantage of wet year and surface water year supplies. This is going to be the biggest question to be answered. How could you take, in our case, 1 million acre feet that goes in 5 months to the ocean every 7 years? How could you harness as much as you can out of that and multiply that by the entire state? We are only 2% of the state, or less than 2% of the state water supply. So could you imagine what can we do in that short time span as far as helping ourselves today? So that's going to be a big challenge. Don't look at the word harmful. Look at what wouldn't be helpful, I guess. So basically, we are at a junction as far as we are concerned, and I am going to extend that to all the SJTA. Inlet recharge we have been doing it. We are an inlet recharge, conjunctive use districts. So in the case of MID, we have 240 wells, 180 are functioning. They haven't ran between 1993 and 2007 because we were able to shut them down and allow the system recover. We had to clean the cobwebs off of these wells and put the system and run them. But depending on what happens with our surface water supply, conjunctive use may not be doable, because unless if it's a sustainable process, you cannot do conjunctive use. In other words, if you don't put as much as you take out, it's not a conjunctive use. So it's one of these things that we have to keep an eye on as far as how we manage groundwater. Statewide regulation could be harmful. We talked about the compromising local effort, and then we talked about one size, and a lot of people talked about one size not fit all. I mean, these basins, especially in this San Joaquin Valley, if we were in Arizona, that would be a lot easier for everybody. It's one aquifer that goes for 500 miles, and we're done. In our case, we have one of the best recharge basins that we have done in the district, and at the edge of the recharge basin is a clay layer. It's just like, and it's only, it doesn't take much to go from totally sandy to totally clear to different formations.
Yeah, it varies by field in some cases. I mean, it can really be at a micro level.
It is
Yeah.
mind-boggling in some areas of why is it doing this or that. So it's that's the difficulty in this process. So many of the areas are on track to understanding their basin, implementing management measures. Hopefully it'll work with them like hopefully it'll work with us under the Integrated Regional Water Management Plan. Again, the biggest tooth that we could add to the plan is how could we bring the planners to work with the water side. And thank you for allowing me to speak to you.
No, thank you very much. Mr. Smart? That must have
you.
been a really hard name to grow up with.
Thank you. I don't know how to go from there.
Sorry.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair, Madam Vice Chair, other esteemed members of the board. You know, there's been a lot of talk today about hats, but quite frankly, the accessory I'd like to have over my head right now would be an umbrella. So, my name is Herb Smart. I am a water resource analyst with Turlock Irrigation District. TID is also a member agency, one of 6 member agencies of the San Joaquin Tributaries Authority. TID is helpful or thankful to the State Water Board for the opportunity today to present and discuss this valuable and meaningful issue. I'm here today to provide a brief high-level overview of some of TID's efforts and challenges within the Turlock Groundwater Basin. Quick little 20-second snippet on TID is that we were founded in 1887 as the first public irrigation district in California. We provide irrigation water predominantly in the form of surface water via the Tuolumne River to about 5,000 growers across 150,000 irrigated acres in Stanislaus and Merced counties. And a little note, 75% of parcels receiving water from us are less than 20 acres in size. Now, the Turlock Groundwater Basin is bounded, as you see here on the diagram, on the north by the Tuolumne River, on the south by the Merced River, and to the west by the San Joaquin River. The eastern boundary is basically the western extent of outcrop of basement rock in the foothills of the Sierra Nevada. Now, the Turlock Groundwater Basin, by name, is a little bit of a misnomer. It's well past the city of Turlock boundaries and past Turlock Irrigation District boundaries as well. The basin itself underlies an area of approximately 347,000 acres. A little note here is that the basin is about twice the size of TID's irrigated acreage of 150,000 acres. And you can see that here on this slide here indicated with the blue is TID's service area, and then you see a lot of other areas to the east where there's a cone of depression forming near the foothills. Now, groundwater levels within TID have remained relatively stable when compared to other areas into the other basin, specifically the green areas you see here, where a cone of depression has formed. TID operates under a groundwater management plan that was created in conjunction with the Turlock Groundwater Basin Association, which is a non-regulatory body. The basin consists of 14 other member agencies. The Basin Association, that is, consists of 14 other member agencies. The association has conducted studies, developed the basin plan, been the coordination communication lead for the basin, secured grant funding, and helped to develop an overall understanding among agencies. Now, this next slide shows a cross-section of the previous slide, essentially, where the y-axis that you see there on the left-hand side is feet above mean sea level, and you see this thin red line that represents the ground or the surface. Looking at the line that parallels the ground underneath, the very first dotted line you see there below the ground level, that's the 1960 groundwater level. Using that as a guide, naturally you'd see that groundwater would flow east to west or right to left here toward the San Joaquin River and its tributaries. Right now that's being inhabited by the cone of depression I mentioned earlier that has an epicenter outside of TID's irrigation service area. It's important to note that regions to the east of TID rely solely on groundwater for irrigation. We estimate that about 75,000 acres are irrigated east of TID within the basin, and the vast majority of those are almond orchards. This next slide is a simplistic diagram showing a few of the major inputs and outputs that are part of our conjunctive use program. The keystone of TID's conjunctive management program is the use of flood irrigation by growers. The vast majority of water, which both urban and agricultural sectors rely on for supply, comes from the groundwater recharge provided by surface water irrigation. TID puts in the basin more than it takes out, quite simply. In many years, groundwater recharge exceeds pumping 2 or 3 times over. From 1991 to 2011, the portion of the Turlock groundwater basin that underlies TID experienced an estimated average net gain of approximately 117,000 acre-feet annually from irrigation within TID. The basin would be far worse off without such recharge. So, what's TID doing? What are some of TID's efforts? Well, looking at modeling and monitoring, for starters, TID is monitoring groundwater levels monthly. We've developed our own ground model of the basin over the years and have continued to refine it. The groundwater model was last updated in 2008. However, recognizing issues within the basin and the importance of having a model to evaluate management options, we're updating the model again currently. In looking at recharging, as I mentioned, TID imports surface water, which provides the bulk of the recharge within the basin. And again, we're putting more in than we're taking out, to the tune of 117,000 acre-feet net annually. In terms of planning, a TID integrated water resources plan is in the works. And in terms of collaboration, we're working heavily, and have been and will be, with the Stanislaus County in their efforts, in their groundwater ordinance efforts and their water advisory committee, which I'll get to on my next slide, which is my last slide. And also staff from various Turlock Groundwater Basin Association member agencies meet monthly. One final point here, looking at the Stanislaus Regional Water Authority, JPA, TID continues to participate in a discussion process with this JPA, which is basically the cities of Turlock, Modesto, and Ceres, regarding the possibility and feasibility of providing surface water to the cities to supplement other drinking water sources such as groundwater. We think that, even in this recently declared drought, we're still at the table this day talking about this possibility with these cities. We think this shows TID's level of commitment to improving the basin, not just from a water quantity standpoint, but also from a water quality standpoint. Last slide here. As you're aware, Stanislaus County is taking a more active role in groundwater management, and they have the regulatory authority to do so. They, just in October of last year, they adopted their groundwater ordinance. Just last month, they authorized a 21-member water advisory committee, and we are hopeful to have a TID board representative sit on this committee. We're also hopeful to have a TID staff member sit on the technical advisory committee that will be advising the water advisory committee. Now, as you see there in red, the WAC doesn't have that big of a job ahead of them. They just have these 4 charges: provide a needs assessment, prioritize groundwater concerns, develop draft policies and directives, and advise the supervisors on groundwater issues. So like I said, they don't have a lot to do. They just have a few things there. Also, just last week, the county hired their water resources manager, who has extensive knowledge of the region and is anticipated to be a bridge builder to many water agencies within the basin. And in closing, the work plan stance on the importance of maintaining local planning and local management of groundwater resources is a good one. TID plans to improve upon its efforts as well as strengthen its partnerships with others, such as Stanislaus County and the cities that reside in it. TID wants to be part of the groundwater solution in our region, and we think local control of the resource will be the best way to find a solution. And last, TID and other water users in the Turlock Groundwater Basin are more motivated now to fix the problem than ever before, and we think there are several local and regional processes in the works that will help us get there. Thank you.
Thank you very, very much. Next, we have Paul Gosselin from Butte County.
Thank you. I guess I'm into the mic appropriately. Chair Marcus, board members, thank you. I'm Paul Goslin. I'm Butte County's Director of the Department of Water and Resource Conservation. Also here to pass along the comments from RCRC. They have a board meeting today, and I'm here passing along their comments, which we worked with them. Butte County is also a member of NACWA. What I'm going to do is I'm going to go through a set of slides to just describe some of the activities we've been doing that also we're going to answer, and I'm going to try to answer the questions that were asked, more specifically on the tools that are needed, the accountability, and the governance. And it's really going to match a lot with what you've heard before. We work closely with our regional partners. We have an integrated plan, Northern Sac Valley IRWM going with 6 counties. We work in the Sac Valley region with Tim and others, and we've learned all of sort of these best practices going through. So there will be some commonality, but there's also going to be uniqueness because each of us got to the place we're at from different points, from different starting points and different paths. And we started with strong landowner commitment to start a lot of the programs. Eventually the county ended up taking over, particularly on wanting to make sure water resources and groundwater was managed. So I think when we start looking at governance, there's going to be different things that are going to work locally, but they're still going to accomplish the same objective on trying to seek ways to sustain and better manage the respective basins. So that works. So one of the things I always like to remind people and think about the comment that we have in California groundwater is not managed, which somewhat irks me to no end, kind of gets back to this point as to where it starts. And it does, from my perspective, it starts at the field level, the irrigators who do take good stewardship of how they pump and sort of their irrigation practices. But also we get into levels of governance and management that's frankly commensurate with the need. And we've seen the range going up to adjudicated basins. But it also starts with legal authorities that currently exist through water districts, water purveyors, municipalities, and counties. We have different tools, and I'll get through that, but counties and municipalities, and you know from land use, do control water through land use planning, whether purposefully or inadvertently through zoning. And
As you say, whether they know it or not.
Exactly. So there is management of groundwater and water resources through all these entities. So the notion that it doesn't occur because it's not centralized is a misnomer. One thing real quickly on Butte County, and this is a quick snapshot on the water agencies throughout the county. Real quickly on Butte County, we have about 2,000 residents, strong agricultural base. About 2/3 of our 1.4 million acre feet demand is met from surface water deliveries. Third is groundwater. The northern portion of the county is largely nuts with independent irrigators. The south, rice, which is covered by water district.
You didn't mean that the way it sounded, I know.
Sorry about that. Tree crops, thank you.
Right.
I live there, so I can get away with that, I guess. So tools, and Tim covered a good portion of that. I won't go through that again, but I'll cover some of our experiences. Is policies, planning, monitoring, analysis, and scientific investigations. These are the basins that we have in Butte County. One thing also to consider, and we look at 515 basins. We manage and account for the basins, and we break them down into 16 different sub-basins in Butte County. Just because, and we've seen this through the analysis and modeling and data, each one of these is unique, even down at the sub-basin level. So when we start thinking about, and I do think using the basins, the established basins, is a good fundamental piece. Also recognize, I think most managers look at the sub-basin level because of the uniqueness of the land use practices, the water supplies, the hydrology, and everything else that really requires you need to drill down even to a lower level in many instances. Now, some of the policies we've put in place, groundwater conservation ordinance, groundwater management plan we have for the county. The districts also have groundwater management plans, and we recognize their jurisdiction over that. A BMO ordinance, a well spacing ordinance, and I'll speak a little bit about our general plan water element. The groundwater conservation ordinance does include a requirement for permits for groundwater substitution transfers. But the ordinance also called, and this was back in 1996, also created and formalized governance structure that was already somewhat established through a water commission, board appointed, board of supervisor appointed, as well as with some public members, as well as a technical advisory committee that's appointed by the board of supervisors. And then also a groundwater status report that originally was going to be produced through the original ordinance by the association that was created by landowners and municipalities and counties locally, but now the county has taken that over. And that gets into some of the disclosure issues on reporting out to the public through the Board of Supervisors annually the groundwater status report. And we have our annual groundwater status report going to the board next month. And so answer the question about, I think the first question on holding accountability, the local agencies through elected bodies are accountable to the citizenry. And how that's conducted is always going to be controversy about who gets appointed to which board. Are they actually doing their job? You're appointed by a governor, and you sometimes, not always, get criticized for doing the right thing and not the right thing. So that's always going to be inherent. But it, by and large, I've seen, and we've all seen at public meetings, when the public shows up and elected officials, there's accountability, especially when materials are made transparent. Groundwater management plan, as I said, and this map illustrates sort of the other districts that have established groundwater management plans. The county had put together a groundwater management plan in 2005 to cover the remainder of the unincorporated areas. Again, this process, doing a groundwater management plan, requires accountability in the public to go out and do it in a public setting, solicit comments, and go through a public process. And these are the policies that, significant policies that came out of our groundwater management plan at the time. And again, they're hitting home on the idea that we need to focus in on the sustainability of the basin. We also, at that time, in the groundwater management plan was a subset, we prepared for the county an integrated water resource plan for ourselves. And that covered a whole range of other issues and topics. It's almost our strategic plan. One of the key pieces I'll point out is the second bullet, protect recharge areas through zoning. And as I'll explain, that also gets into the general plan update. And I will mention again, we are part of the Northern Sac Valley IRWM that's getting close to completion with the 6 county group. General Plan 2030, one of the issues that came up early on with the general plan in around 2008, 2009 was the call for a water resource element, which the board added to the general plan. And that did a couple things. It allowed us to interact a lot better, and you're talking about the communication with the land use planning agencies and the water people, which is translation issues and just being able to coordinate better, which brought us closer together in coordination. But it also took an opportunity to compile all the policies and programs and issues that the county had put together for water, and be able, through the stakeholder groups, discuss what gaps were missing and what other policy areas we needed to focus in on to allow us to have broader county policies as it relates to both land use planning and water policy. Now, a couple of the key things that came out of that was a increased emphasis on groundwater recharge and wanting to protect those areas through land use planning decisions, and also to improve the analysis of groundwater impacts from local major developments. Now, there's notions that somehow having a water element in a general plan is going to be a panacea and fix everything, and I'd say that it's not. That was a choice I think the advantage of at least what I saw is that it just provided a means of compiling everything into one area. You could quite easily have had the same result having everything dispersed as traditionally through the conservation element. But it also did bring the discussion, our ability to educate the public a lot better about the tools and analysis we had in the groundwater modeling, the analysis on the sustainability of the basin, which was done in 2005, where the water comes from, how it's used throughout the county, to better inform the public. So we can answer later, but general plan issues are going to continue. We're still scratching the surface on that relationship between the land use planning and my program. Again, the other tool, monitoring and analyses. I think there was discussion earlier, good discussion on thresholds and that term. Really for groundwater supply and levels, the term threshold, I'd suggest, dropping that and taking that away, because it is a changing issue over time depending upon the variables. And again, we have a groundwater status report that looks at just not only groundwater elevation, but also subsidence monitoring and saline intrusion. We do have a groundwater model for the basin. We're updating that now and using that as the basis and foundation to update our water inventory, our water budget. We did a water budget in 2005. We're updating that now to take into account the changes in land use, but also the projections now that the general plans are done by the county and municipalities. Look at projections out in the future and incorporate other analyses on longer-term droughts and climate change. One of the tricks we have and real challenges is trying to project out potential changes in agriculture, and that's going to be a big driver if this shifts from areas where there isn't any groundwater demand or shifts from surface water to groundwater, but that's a challenge we're going to try to address at least through some of the analysis. The monitoring network, over 100 monitoring wells, many of which are dedicated monitoring wells with continued data loggers. I think you've seen in at least a lot of areas is good monitoring. And I will make a mention, and this kind of gets into a suggestion. We got comments and criticizing and critiquing a lot of the concept paper, but one thing that I'd suggest that is a good model is DWR's Northern Region Office and how they interact with the counties and programs in our region. It's a good model on technical assistance and cooperation locally to try to work together, and there's good cooperation all the way around. Recharge investigations, there's a lot of scientific study to better understand the basin. Again, going back to try to understand and improve the modeling. And again, overall evaluation of groundwater conditions. Just as a couple wrap-up points, I think suggesting on the report, which was real well done, I think we all really liked the beginning talking about description about how groundwater is managed locally, and is done very well. I think that was one of the few times we've actually seen that described very well. And I think from today, and I think thinking about what's come up, one of the challenges probably for the board is to go back and not so much think about changing what we've all done and what we haven't done or would like to do, need to do, but also probably more